I hate this question. It changes every single week who I think is going to get in the playoffs. But right now, if you ask me right now, which 4 teams, I would say...
I wouldn't stake my life on naming 4 teams to finish in the playoffs.
Whatever happens with Blackburn for the remainder of the season, people have got to look back on this as one of the most remarkable rises of a player that we've ever seen at second-tier level.
I think the board have got a decision to make. He doesn't know his best side, which at this point in the season, frankly, isn't good enough for a team of the Stoke budget.
Justin, if that happened to any other championship side, it would cripple them, wouldn't it?
And then Chelsea pay £8 million for him. Out of nowhere, absolutely out of nowhere.
Playing for the greats like Ajax, Juventus, Barcelona, but just played 6 games for Crystal Palace in that season, and then summed up the whole saga by saying it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. This man's won the Champions League, ladies and gentlemen. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Stopwatch. It's the championship show with a little twist. It's 5 topics, a 2-minute timer, 2 hosts, Ryan and Justin from the Second Tier podcast. Let's get right into it. As Fulham sit 14 points clear at the top of the championship, where do they rank amongst the division's best ever sides? Justin Peach.
Pretty high, I'd imagine, given how ruthless they've been this season. And we've got into March and we've run out of things to say about them in terms of positives because they've just been that good. At current standings as well, conceded just 30 goals, scored 89. They have lost 5 games, which obviously isn't anywhere near Reading's 2 in the 05-06 season. But points-wise, the maths say that they can still beat that record. So they've got to be viewed as the best, or at least in the top 3, I would say.
They're 100% for me in the top 3. I am edging slightly towards top 1. A lot of that is going to depend, though, on whether they break Reading's points record, which is possible. They at the moment, I think the maximum they can get is 109. And considering they've won all but 2 games in 2022 so far, you wouldn't rule them out getting the 109. But the thing is that at the defensively, which doesn't get talked about as much, they're rock solid, aren't they? Going forwards, they're absolutely ruthless. They're just in every position. They've got a contender for the best player in the division, haven't they? They're just a ruthless side.
Yeah, you're spot on. Ruthless is the word. How many teams have they swatted away this season? For example, they've scored 7 twice. They scored 7 goals twice this season, which is just absolutely absurd. And one of those teams they beat were Blackburn, who were pushing for the top 2 until recently, and are probably going to end up in the playoffs this season potentially. So they're a very good side with very, very good players, and that's probably understating it.
And at the moment, they're playing at their peak as well. You do not want to come up against Fulham at the moment because they are just ruthlessly efficient. Justin, what's next topic?
With no win in 7 games, is Michael O'Neill under pressure at Stoke City?
I think he's under pressure. I think the fans aren't particularly keen on him. I would be surprised if he got sacked, though, because I don't think the Stoke board particularly want to shift him. I think they're more than happy to go with him into next season. But without a doubt, he's under pressure because they have been really poor recently. Some of the selections he's made have been questionable. But at the same time, he's had problems with injuries, which we might get onto later. Justin, what do you think?
I think the board have got a decision to make, and I would lean towards potentially freshening things up in the summer. I feel that this was the season for Michael O'Neill and Stoke City to make that assault into the top 6. But once again, a second half of the season syndrome has set in for Stoke, where they've become painfully inconsistent. And I know Michael O'Neill has had injuries, and that's fair. He's missed. A lot of key players have got injured at the wrong time for him at the same time as well. But saying that, he took too long to adapt his team to fill in, get players to fill in for those injured players. And now he's got players back available to him after a good January. They're still inconsistent, and he doesn't know his best side, which at this point in the season, frankly, isn't good enough for a team of Stoke's budget.
Justin, he's lost his 3 best players at various different points of the season. He's lost his 3 best players for numerous months. If that happened to any other championship side, it would cripple them, wouldn't it? Imagine if Fulham, for example, lost Mitrovic, Wilson, and Adarabayo for multiple months.
Yeah.
they probably wouldn't win the division, would they?
Mm.
They'd probably still go up, but it would still cripple them. But look at other divisions, other teams in the division as well. Brereton Diaz, Rotherell, and I know someone else at Blackburn.
Yeah,
Imagine
yeah,
if
yeah.
that happened to them, they drop into mid-table as well.
Yeah, spot on. But at the same time, Stoke had a very good January. They recruited experienced players, they recruited good loan players, and he still can't get any consistency out of them. They're not winning the last 6 games, and as I say, that isn't good enough. They've got a big budget at Stoke, so if you lose your key players, you've got to find a solution. You've got to find it quick, even if it's grinding games out, and he hasn't done that.
Next topic, Justin. Which player has surpassed your expectations the most so far this season?
This had me deliberating so much. Andy Vyman came into my head. The amount of goals he scored this season has been ridiculous. But Jed Spence for me, I didn't really have too high expectations for him going to Forest. I just thought at that point it was a way of getting him out the door at Borough so they could potentially bring somebody else in that position. And he wasn't much fancied by Neil Warnock, which automatically means I don't fancy him either because Neil Warnock he means everything, doesn't he? But he's playing at a level now where he's being linked with top clubs, which again, for a player of his experience, is madness. And that right hand side at Forest is so hard to defend against because you've got Brennan Johnson and you've got Jed Spence, and if one isn't on form, the other one is. It's quite scary, and quite frankly, he's been the league's best right wing back this season.
Yeah, either him or Isaiah Jones, isn't it? Which
Hmm.
is ironic because they both belong to Middlesbrough. But before he was a raw talent, Monty, when he was at
Yeah.
Middlesbrough. And this season at Forest, he's really moulded into a brilliant right wing back. Going forwards, he's sensational. He's got a bit of work to do defensively, but without a doubt, I agree with you. It's either him or Isaiah Jones for the best right back in the division. The player who surpassed my expectations the most so far this season. It's a bit of a tap in, but it's easy to forget how good he was at the start of the season, and it's Ben Brereton Diaz. Obviously, last season he was very inconsistent. He had a good spell or two where he was finding goals, but then after that he was just Ben Brereton Monty. But then changing into Ben Brereton Diaz, evolving into Ben Brereton Diaz has made him into this beast that Blackburn are sorely missing at the moment. And whatever happens with Blackburn for the remainder of the season, people have got to look back on this as one of the most remarkable rises of a player that we've ever seen at second tier level. Justin, do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. He's a player that I've really enjoyed following this season. The goals he's scored, the finishes he's put in, and the confidence he's gained from his spells out in Chile is just ridiculous. And it is quite frankly an amazing story and probably one of the best I've experienced while covering the championship. While viewing the championship, it is quite balmy. And to think that he's got 20 goals already, he's had injuries, and he's been part of a team that's underperformed at times. Very, very good season for him.
Justin, what's next topic?
With under a quarter of the season remaining, which four sides are you tipping to finish in the playoffs?
I hate this question. I hate this question because I've changed my mind so much over the past God knows how many weeks. It
Mhm.
changes every single week who I think is going to get in the playoffs. But right now, if you ask me right now, which four teams, I would say Huddersfield, Sheffield United, Middlesbrough, and Forest. Um, I feel a bit bad leaving out Luton because they're in great form at the moment. And if they continue their form that they've shown this calendar year, then they'll run it very, very close at the very least. But those four for me are the ones I'm looking at and thinking, yeah, you're probably the most likely. One of the question marks I've got is whether Bournemouth will drop into the playoff picture now because of their recent wobble. But I think if I had to stake my life on four teams who I think will be in the playoffs, I'd probably go for those four. What do you think, Justin?
I wouldn't stake my life on naming four teams to finish in the playoffs at the moment.
No,
It
but
is
if you
so
had to,
hard.
is what I'm trying to say.
I would abstain. It's so difficult to pick. But if I'm being pushed into a corner and forced to pick, which I think is a better expression, I would go Huddersfield, Blackburn, Sheffield United, and Forest. I think Borough experiencing a little bit of inconsistency. Millwall perhaps left it a little bit too late. Showed up Blackburn. They didn't create too many chances there. QPR again, they're dropping quite remarkably. And Luton probably don't have quite enough this season to do it, maybe next season. So the four teams I'd pick would be Huddersfield, Blackburn, Sheffield United and Forest. Just think Forest have got more in their squad than other sides, and consistency, which is massively key at this point.
Interesting picking a team who's only scored 3 goals in 12 games, but we'll leave that to you, ladies and gentlemen. Finally, just in its second tier retro time, this is the part of the show where we look back on the greatest gifts that the Championship has ever blessed on us. The question this week is this: with Jed Spence being linked with a move to Bayern Munich, what's the most left field transfer in Championship history?
There's been loads. Wolves pretty much made a dozen left field transfers during that promotion season, didn't they, under Nuno Espirito Santo? But the one I'm picking is Michael Hector to Chelsea. Michael Hector's career wasn't particularly interesting ahead of his breakout campaign in the 14-15 season for Reading. He made 41 appearances that season, but his loan spells before that, pretty much non-league, with exception to a spell in League 1 and 2 and in the Scottish Prem. And then Chelsea pay £8 million for him out of nowhere, absolutely out of nowhere. The season after they won the Premier League under Jose Mourinho, which, is just absolutely bonkers to me. £8 million on a player you're never going to play. He was 22 at the time or 23 at the time, which is past that point where you can consider him a youngster who's going on to bigger things because he's heading into his peak. So, quite a bizarre one, and not surprised to see him back in the Championship already.
Stinks of just trying to fill out the homegrown quota in the older registration rules. My most bizarre transfer ever is Edgar Davids, when he famously signed for Crystal Palace in the 2010-11 season, of course, playing for the greats like Ajax, Juventus, Barcelona, but just played 6 games for Crystal Palace in that season. And I'm not ashamed to say it's one of my favourite things to ever happen in football. So he hadn't played for 2 years prior to this spell, so he's probably a bit rusty. He joined on a pay as you play deal, easy for me to say, but obviously it's to make sure his fitness was up to scratch. But he played just 6 games before leaving in November after just 3 months, and then summed up the whole saga by saying it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. This man's won the Champions League, ladies and gentlemen. And I think that's a good way to wrap up episode 25 of the Stopwatch. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below and drop us a like if you've enjoyed. And please subscribe for more content like this within the Second Tier Podcast. You can find us at Second Tier Pod on Twitter. I'm Ryan Dilks1. That's Justin Peach 27. And thank you for watching.